So I was watching a video recently on the Writing on Games channel by Hamish Black, who is an excellent games writer with an excellent accent, by the way, and I strongly recommend checking out his channel. Anyway, the particular video I was watching was this one, The Real Problem with Steam. You should definitely go and watch the video. It's a really thought-provoking and detailed analysis of what's really wrong with the PC gaming market at the moment. Essentially, when we all complain, and rightfully so, about how hard it is to find the good games on Steam these days, how it's become flooded with bad ports and asset flips, how they fail to curate their recommendations and show us the stuff we actually want to see, it's really a symptom of a deeper problem. That Steam has become a monopoly, and their goal is to simply own as much of the PC gaming market as possible without regard for the quality of the games they sell. This makes a lot of sense. We all love having our games in one place, in one program, in one library, to the point where many of us even add non-Steam games to our library just to keep it all together. I think it's also fair to say that many of us have become hooked on their DRM and want our friends to see what we're playing, how many hours we've spent on a particular game, what achievements we've earned, and so on. To the point where some of us won't even buy a game somewhere, even at a discount, if it doesn't give us a Steam key. This video really got me thinking about my own habits, and I realized that it's actually a very strange thing that I've become a part of this group. After all, I'm not exactly the kind of person who follows the modern trend of centralizing everything to one program or one device. I don't have a smartphone, and refuse to buy one. I have a cheap Nokia which does nothing but call, send text messages, and function as my alarm clock. It doesn't even have a camera. I also have an NVIDIA Shield K1 tablet which I use for playing mobile games, but I don't use it for social media or communication. I don't even use it for reading. When my old Kindle keyboard sadly died a few months ago, I sought out and purchased an e-reader with no built-in lighting and no touchscreen. I like having a dedicated device just for reading, which doesn't shine an extra light into my eyes, and I don't like touchscreen interfaces. What about taking photos? Sometimes I use my tablet for that, but I also have several actual cameras which don't do anything but take photos. Essentially, while my friends laugh and wave their one-stop-shop smartphones in my face, I proudly continue to use separate dedicated devices. And it's not just hardware that I treat this way. I have 3 browsers installed on my computer, not including Explorer, which, come on, no one uses Explorer. I use each of them for different purposes, and they are customized for those purposes. I use several programs and websites for communication. With some people, I just use email. With the few, I use Facebook's Messenger, though I try to keep away from Facebook otherwise. I have a Twitter account specifically for interacting with YouTubers. I use Evolve for its VPN capabilities, but I refuse to use its chat. I have Discord for that. Then there's Skype for work conversations. Heck, I don't even use just one service for games. Sure, most of my games are on Steam, but what about Minecraft? That's a separate thing, one I use frequently, and even in that case, I use several launchers. I have the FTB, Technic, AT, and Twitch, formerly Curse, launchers, and I use them all. There are even some mod packs that have their own dedicated launchers like Life in the Woods, and I still have Multi-MC installed, though I rarely use that one these days. So why on earth do I still insist on using Steam for almost everything else? I asked myself this as I was watching the Writing on Games video, and I spent some serious time thinking about the answer. And in order to find that answer, we have to look back into my history a little bit. I grew up in a Nintendo family. We subscribed to Nintendo Power, and to this day, we still keep our old NES, SNES, and N64 at my mom's house. Although we never had much money, somehow we always managed to have a few games on each console, and we played them to death. We had to. They were expensive, and we couldn't easily afford to get any more. When we finally got our first computer, we also got a couple of games, but they were cheap bargain bin titles. What little funds we had for games, we used on consoles. Eventually, we got the internet, and a whole new world opened up. I was a teenager without any funds of my own. I started to read about new games that were coming out, but I didn't have any money to buy them. So I stuck with the free Flash games that were available, and spent a lot of time playing MUDs, which were basically text-based MMOs. I still think fondly on all those hours on Necromium, writing text macros to shorten the commands to attack, and, well, that's not important now. Eventually I got heavily into Dwarf Fortress, which had more depth and replayability than any other free game I had found, and that became my new go-to game. Games on the computer were something I grew to think of as being free. Sure, there were some big-name PC titles that you had to pay for, but those were for other people. I would read about them and sigh as I thought about how nice it must be to be able to buy stuff like that, before returning to my own little world of Flash Helicopter and ASCII. But things were happening in the PC gaming world. It was sometime in my university years that I started to hear about game piracy and DRM. Being at the age of belief that my opinions were well-informed and correct, as well as confidence that broadcasting my opinions would somehow change the world, I became a soldier against DRM. Developers shouldn't treat their customers like criminals, I declared. Never mind the fact that I wasn't actually one of their customers. I learned how to download pirated games and enjoyed my newfound access to a world that had previously been closed to me. Let me make one thing clear here. I did not have the money to buy these games. There was never a choice between buying a game or pirating it. The choice was between pirating it or not getting to play it. I was a student, a child in a family with low income. I was working and going to school at the same time, trying to earn enough to cover food and transport costs, and I already had thousands of dollars of student loan debt that I knew I would later have to pay off. I didn't go out partying with friends or buy new clothes. It was the secondhand store for me, and even then I cringed at the idea of spending those few dollars for a pair of worn-out jeans. We didn't even pay for internet in my house. At the time, there were free dial-up services available that let you online at the cost of displaying ads on your monitor at all times. Sound familiar? I'm not trying to make excuses for stealing games, I just want to put all this into context. No game developer lost money because of me downloading their games at this point. And this was the days before torrents, too. Back then, you had to find a pirated game on an ugly website in some shady back alley part of the internet, usually broken into 10 or more individual zip files, which you had to download at dial-up speed and then reassemble into a complete file. You had to work to steal games back in my day. But I digress. As time went on and things like the Spore DRM debacle happened, I felt increasingly secure in my decision to pirate games. Even when I finished school and slowly started to earn a little more money, the idea of buying games didn't even enter my head. I developed a personal philosophy in my young adulthood of saving money wherever possible, something which turned out to be a very good idea later on when unexpected big expenses started popping up. Even when I could afford new clothes, I continued to shop at the secondhand store. And even when I could technically buy a new game, I continued to download them for free, something which was becoming easier as internet speeds increased. I was very paranoid about Big Brother watching me, and didn't like the idea of putting any kind of DRM on my computer, so sometimes I got pirated versions of games just to avoid that. I got very self-righteous about fighting Big Bad Developer who was treating their customers more and more like criminals. There were times when, if you bought a game, you were roped into an intrusive DRM, whereas if you pirated it, you were free of all that. It just made sense. I loudly declared to anyone who would listen, which was pretty much nobody if I'm honest, that these developers needed to learn that to make money, they needed to sell their games without DRM. They needed to respect their customers. We deserved respect. And so time went on, and the idea of PC gaming being free rooted itself ever deeper into my mind. I saw the initial rise of Steam, and I scoffed at it. That was DRM gone mad, it was. I wasn't having any of that. In fact, I started donating the occasional few dollars to developers of free games like Dwarf Fortress to show my support of their work, but I still shied away from actually purchasing non-free games. Enter Humble Bundle, the website which changed my gaming habits forever. Someone called to my attention one of their early bundles, and my eyes widened immediately. There was a game in there that I really, really wanted. And here was a way I could buy it for a single dollar. A price even I couldn't argue with, and donate to charity in the process. Truth be told, I don't even remember what game it was. It certainly wasn't one that rooted itself in my memory. All I remember now is that at the time, I had to have it. And yes, it would have been possible to pirate it, but it was hard to rage against the DRM machine when the game I wanted was being offered, along with a handful of others which looked good, at such a low price, absolutely DRM free. I bought it. And then, not too long after that, I bought another bundle. I discovered that it felt really, really good to actually pay for a game, especially when you knew that you had full control over where your money went. I agonized over those sliders, carefully deciding how much should go to the developer, how much should go to charity, and yes, how much I should throw to Humble as a tip for providing this excellent service. It was a new sort of rush for me. I was actually buying my very first games for myself. Keep in mind that before, the only games my family bought were for Nintendo consoles, and it was my mother and my grandparents who paid for those. It felt good. And then the day came, inevitably, when Humble offered a bundle full of games I really wanted, but with a catch. These games were not DRM free. In this case, I know exactly which bundle it was. The Paradox Interactive Weekly Sale. It was full of games I knew to be high quality and really, really wanted to try out. and I had already started to shy away from game piracy, more or less. I had been learning more about the process of actually developing games, how difficult it is, and how much companies were struggling to stay afloat. I had started to feel guilty about all those games I'd downloaded before. I didn't want to do that anymore if I could possibly help it. And while I still couldn't afford to buy expensive titles, after all, I still had many thousands of dollars in student loans to pay off, I could afford a few dollars for a bundle of quality games. I agonized over this decision for days. Buying this bundle meant signing up for Steam, putting their DRM program on my computer, and never being the legal owner of the game itself, just a license. But in the end, I caved. I bought the bundle, I downloaded Steam, and I became instantly addicted. Steam's DRM is something I do not begrudge them one bit. They actually give you something in return for giving them control of the access to your games. There were achievements, and then trading cards. There was a social network. It was a community. And at the time, it was a community containing well-curated and high-quality content. And then there were the sales! The prices dropped so low during sales that even I started picking up games outside of bundles. Even games I knew I wouldn't have time to play for a while. Steam really worked on me because I'm the type of person who likes to collect things in games. I'm an achievement hunter for sure, to the point where sometimes I catch myself playing games I don't even like, feeling compelled to get that next achievement. Fortunately, I've gotten a lot better about that lately, but I definitely have an instinct to get all the things, and Steam offers a lot of things to get. And that's really not a bad thing. Because Steam's DRM is so engaging and fun to use, players like me who in the past were unwilling to pay for games now have no problem doing so. Piracy has become much less of a concern, and developers can be sure that a lot more people will buy their game now than might have in the past. And I'm currently in the fortunate position to be able to afford at least the cheaper or heavily reduced titles. I'm still far from rich, and I still don't even look at the big new AAA titles that cost $60 or more, but it doesn't put much of a dent in my finances to buy the occasional smaller indie game or humble bundle. Low game prices have not become such a good thing, though. When I was a kid, we got one new Nintendo game and then played it for hours and hours. We had to. It would be a long time before we could afford a new one. Now games are often so cheap, we buy them without even considering whether we'll play them. Right now, I have 570 games in my Steam library, the vast majority of which I have never played. I don't even know where I got many of them. That's a problem in and of itself. But that's also a long conversation, and we should save that for another video. I became so hooked on Steam's DRM that I never even considered other game vendors. When Good Old Games came out, I thought it was a great idea in principle. Here was a company that respected and wanted to support both developers and gamers. They trusted their customers enough to sell games without DRM. Good for them. And yet, I never bought anything from them. I did eventually sign up for a Good Old Games account to claim some of the free games they gave away, but I just couldn't bring myself to buy anything there. After all, there were no achievements. They wouldn't track my hours of play on my Steam account for all to see, as though anyone was looking in the first place. No one would know that I was playing. What's more, with no DRM, I felt an old instinct kicking in. Why pay for something when you can get it for free? If it's on Good Old Games, then it's surely easy to pirate, and your money is valuable. I had the same feeling when Itch popped up. Sure, it was a cool website with some cool games on it, but why wouldn't they give me a Steam key? If it wasn't on Steam, I just wasn't interested. And so now, here I sit, looking back on this lifetime of game purchasing and piracy habits. I'm proud to say that I no longer pirate any games. I have far too much respect for developers and far too many years of that behavior to make up for. If I can't afford a game, I simply don't play it. After all, I have more games now than I could ever hope to play anyway. But I still have almost all my games on Steam. I still haven't bought anything from Good Old Games. I did make one purchase from Itch not too long ago, a good bundle, something I actually featured on this channel. And why did I buy that one? Because the money went to charity, to some organizations I support. It wasn't about the games, it was about the donation. Well, I'd like to announce that I've decided to change my ways. That video on writing on games made some very good points, and it made me realize that in some ways, I've been part of the problem. I want to support indie devs, but that means I need to support platforms that actually care about their work. I need to purge myself of that old instinct that grew inside me when I was growing up in a low-income family, that you should never spend money if you don't have to, as well as the instinct to only play games that have external achievements that all the world can see. After all, if I want attention, well, I gotta have a whole YouTube channel for that now. If you're still with me, I want to thank you for coming along on this little journey through my past. I'd also like to make an announcement. I'm going to start using what little influence I have to try to call attention to some of the awesome games on itch, and eventually on good old games as well. In the past, I've invited you guys to suggest and recommend games from my Steam library for me to do videos on. Now I want to invite you to look at my itch library. It's still mostly just games from a good bundle, but there are some great ones in there. I'm also going to try to buy the occasional title from their store to do videos on. I'll be posting all this on my Discord as well, so if you haven't joined us in there, check out the link in the description and pop in and say hello. I hope you found this video interesting and thought-provoking, and that maybe you consider giving these smaller game vendors a serious look. If you have anything to say, do leave a comment. I'll look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.